Hey, what's up guys? It's Luke from Luke the Gathering, and we are opening up draft booster packs to see which cards we would pick if they were a draft booster that we got in a booster draft tournament, like on Friday Night Magic or anything like that. What I found so far is the collation. You know, I used to collect sports cards. I still do. I'm not out of it or anything. I haven't bought sports cards in a while, but when I bought sports cards, sometimes you knew the players you were going to get because you saw a certain player and they go in sequence. So if you got like Bob Jones, you knew that Ted Schneider would be behind him. And so that's kind of what I found so far. A lot of these packs, the commons seem to go in a sequence. So let's see if that continues today. But this one is a fresh one. We haven't seen this in the series yet. Price of Loyalty. Mordekainen's Polymorph. Priest of Ancient Lore. Thieves Tools. Plummet. Brazen Dwarf. You Find the Villain's Lair. Spiked Pit Trap. Leather Armor. A Direwolf Prowler. Druid class. I think this is the first class card we've gotten in the series. Faeriewild Trickster. Borrowin of Clan Undoer. And the rare is the Eye of Vachna. This is an interesting rare card. I wonder where it's going to fit. I wonder if we're going to take it first, or if we're not going to choose to take it first. And of course, I forgot to take the tokens out, and so we're just going to ditch those. But the Eye of Vachna is the rare, so let's see where we place these cards. Alright, let's go ahead and put these cards out. And we got some new things here, including our first enchantment class card. I think that'll be interesting to see where we take that. I will say just at the beginning that when the set came out, I was like, ooh, these classes are amazing, and I mean, they can be, for sure. So there are the cards, and let's see what we're going to do with these cards. So our rare is the Eye of Vachna, and what the Eye of Vachna can do, it's an interesting card. When Eye of Vachna enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 2 life. So 2 life for a card. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2. If you do, you draw a card and you lose 2 life. So you have the option of drawing a card and losing 2 life. So it's optional. But is that what we would take first in here? Now, I see some cards that I would definitely take in this pack if it were me, and some of these cards I feel like are less liked by others. But my question is, if I got this pack, would I take the Eye of Vachna, or would I let it go? And in this case, I'm actually not going to take it first. What I think I'll do, this is a tough one, and this will probably be a little bit more of a controversial pick, but I really like Thieves Tools, and I know other people don't. I think people were high on this card initially, and now it's sort of the opposite. People are not high on Thieves Tools at all. Brighten up that side. So Thieves Tools, I like it because it makes a creature unblockable, and they only can have a power of 3. But there are plenty of creatures that get power of 3, or you augment them with equipment, they can be power of 3. You can put like a Reaper's Talisman on a creature. You got creatures that when they hit, they can go to the dungeon, or they can get you a treasure. These are all things that I find tremendously valuable that combine well. Now, if you don't have those other things, then yeah, Thieves Tools is not that good. I wouldn't just have it and not have things that I specifically would use Thieves Tools for. So like a Horde Robber, I'd put Thieves Tools on. Even though you're only pinging for 1, you do get that treasure. And if you have the the Fang Blade, the Death Touch Black 2/2 guy. I think he's 2/2 or 3/2, I forget. But he, I think he's 2/2. He ventures into the dungeon every time, and if they have Thieves Tools, they can't be blocked. So I think Thieves Tools is something I love to use. And by the way, when it hits the battlefield, you get to create a treasure token. So not only do you get that, you also get a treasure token, which helps you fix your mana. There are many times where I'll splash like a Triumphant Adventure. That's been done recently. And I was able to use these tools to get a treasure and then be able to play that. And that was nice. So I think Thieves Tools is a really good card. So I would take that. Most people probably would not take that. So what would you take? The second card that I would take is also something that I think most people would not take, and that would be Price of Loyalty. This card has won me so many games. It surprises folks, and I think it's getting less surprising because people do it a lot, but it says that you gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. If mana from a treasure was spent to cast the spell, that creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So you can use treasure, maybe from the Thieves Tools, to steal one of their guys. And a lot of times, I mean, this happens a lot. Maybe they only have one creature there. You can use that one creature to attack and just get damage in. Let's say they have a flyer and they're just hitting you. Like a dragon, you could Price of Loyalty that. A Westgate Regent can be taken with this. You can take anything with this. And if you use treasure, it's like you're bribing them and they'll even do more work for you. So I just find this card to be really awesome. I love this card, and it's definitely a card I would take. Now, the reason why I might not take it is that sometimes these cards show up more than once, and I know that people don't tend to take this card very high, so I feel like, oh, if I wait on it, it'll come back, and a lot of times it does. But if I get too antsy, I end up taking Price of Loyalty, and I rarely regret it. I love taking Price of Loyalty. Now, is Eye of Vachna coming up next? I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say the Priest of Ancient Lore. Priest of Ancient Lore is so cool. First of all, it's only a 2/1, but it costs 3, so you're like, why is that great? But when he enters the battlefield, you gain a life and draw a card. Both of those things are very, very important. I think gaining life, especially like we talked about in one of the earlier packs with Roper, or I think the Roper, that untaps that. There are a lot of class cards, or some classes where if you gain a life, you get a +1/+1 counter. There's all sorts of things that gaining life triggers, and so especially in white. So I think Priest of Ancient Lore, if you're in white, this guy is one of the must-have guys in the deck. Just so good. Okay, so there's Priest of Ancient Lore. I think then will be the Eye of Vachna. We'll go Eye of Vachna next. Okay, we talked about the Eye of Vachna already, how when it enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life. And then the nice thing is it's a choice. So like on the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2. So like, let's say you don't need an extra card, or you don't want to pay the life. It's 2 life, 10% of your initial total. Then you don't have to do it. But then it's just useless and sitting there. But maybe there is a turn where like you really need to draw, or like you really think you need a card, then it can be helpful. But in this pack, I think I'm picking it 4th, and I'm happy with it being there. So we took care of Eye of Vachna. The next pick I think would be an interesting one. I'm kind of deciding between Borrowin, Direwolf Prowler, and maybe even Druid class. I think we're gonna go with Borrowin. I think black and white is a good archetype. Black-white is a good archetype, and Borrowin's not too bad. So when he enters the battlefield, venture into the dungeon, that's good, because black-white is definitely a venture-style deck. And then when Borrowin attacks, you can return up to 1 creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. So that's a very powerful ability that he has. It doesn't go into your hand. That creature goes onto the battlefield. I think that's great. I think that's really, really good. So I would say if you can get those dungeons through, that ability is really nice. And then next we're going to take Direwolf Prowler. I forgot about this guy in the last time I saw him. He was in the same sort of alternate art form, but a 2/2 for 3, but pay 1 and a green, and Direwolf Prowler gets +2/+2 and haste. And you can only do that once a turn. So if you could do that forever, man, this guy would be amazing. But only once per turn, but it turns into a 4/4, and a 4/4 is a nice creature in this format and in this set. So I think that's what we're going to end up with, Direwolf Prowler. Okay, then leading off the second row, we're going to have Druid class. You know, I used to take classes more before, but I feel like I don't take as many now. I mean, they're good. There are cards in the set that can just eliminate them, which is kind of scary, especially if you've sunk mana into them. This one, it says, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. That's the first step. So if you pay 2, you get this. The trouble with it is, I mean, how many lands are you going to really drop to generate how much life? I mean, I always find that, you know, you already have to spend 2 lands, so you have to have, maybe you get a land on, you know, every other turn or something like that. Or every turn if you're lucky, if you have the right land composition. So that's semi-helpful. Level 2 lets you play an additional land. I find that very rare. I rarely have like all these lands in my hand. But number 3, it says, when this class becomes a level 3, target land you control becomes a creature with haste. And this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. It's still a land. So that's a really nice one. So for 5 mana, you can turn the land into like sort of a big, beefy creature. That's nice. I think that's pretty cool. But I think in practice, it doesn't happen that often. So that's why this card ends up here. I think maybe you could make it work. But I think I would have put it a lot higher if you asked me a couple weeks ago. But at this point, I'm putting it right here. Okay, next. Ooh, I don't really like any of this stuff next too much. I guess we'll take Spiked Pit Trap. I talked about this card already. You pay 1, it goes on there, and then you could also flash it in. Basically, it's a removal card, deals 5 damage to a creature. Many creatures will die to this, but it is kind of pricey. So it'd probably take you a whole turn just to use the Spiked Pit Trap. I think if you don't have any type of removal, the Spiked Pit Trap is something you might be able to live with. I've seen people with this on the board. I played in a game, a guy had 2 of these on the board. It was really interesting. I do somehow feel like flyers should be immune to this, but they're not. Next, I think we'll put the Faeriewild Trickster. It's a creature. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, create a 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature token with flying. So you can make creatures that fly. This would be good in a dice rolling deck, and I think that archetype was something that people were thinking about doing early in the format, but I just don't see a lot of dice rolling decks. I think because they're not very popular. One, it's blue-red, and that color combination just doesn't seem to see the light of day in terms of play. So I don't know how good Faeriewild Trickster would be. You'd have to have a lot of cards in your deck that do dice rolling, and this character is, you know, just kind of blasé, not really great. Another dice roller would be Brazen Dwarf. This is probably one of my least favorite 2-drop reds. It says whenever you roll 1 or more dice, Brazen Dwarf deals 1 damage. So these two would work together in that dice rolling set, I suppose. It's a 1/3 for the Brazen Dwarf. Now, I think it's because it's a dwarf, right? Like, I wish if it was a goblin, I think maybe that has more synergy with the other goblins, but because it's dwarf and it's part of a different archetype than the Pack Tactics deck, it goes here. I'm very hesitant usually to take the dwarf. The next one, I think, I'll put Plummet. Green always tends to have some sort of card that gets rid of flying, and this just destroys the creature with flying, just then and there. It shows like a dragon falling out of the sky, I think, and that's very appropriate because, you know, there's lots of dragons in this set. Plummet can just take them out for 2 mana. I think that's really good. The only bad thing is if they don't have flyers, or if there are very few flyers in their deck, you know, this becomes a really dead card. I think most folks are a little bit hesitant to put a card like this into their deck. It's usually left on the side. I think it'd be decent in a sideboard, so when you play again and you know they have a bunch of flyers, you know, you sub this card in and you do really well with it. But I think maybe you just pick it for your sideboard if you're in green. The next card would be you find the Villain's Lair. It's a 2 blue and a 1, and counter a target spell. So it's a counter spell. Again, blue isn't that great in this set, so it's hard to recommend blue cards. And then, you know, if you're trying to be a control-y deck, just control decks don't seem to work well in this format. You know, your opponent's probably going to be as aggressive as they can be, and holding back mana and trying to possibly combat a counter a spell, I should say, it's not that good. You can also draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. I think that's an ability you might use more. It's nice that this card has dual ability. I just don't see, if I'm putting blue with another color, I'm probably supporting the other color more. And then this is just a hard card to really find its way into a deck. After that, we're going to go to Mordenkainen's Polymorph. This is an instant that until end of turn, target creature becomes a dragon with base power, toughness 4/4, and gains flying. So it basically turns them into that typical dragon that you find in the D&D set. I don't see people playing this card. You know, it kind of just instantly turns one of your guys into a 4/4 dragon. I don't know how useful that is. I'm sure in some circumstance it would be useful, and like you're like, oh, I could have used that just now, but it's so situational, and I think that there are so many better cards than it. This is just going to kind of clog up the space inside of your 40 card deck. I don't think this card will hardly ever make the cut. It certainly would be a surprise though, because I don't see anyone using Mordenkainen's Polymorph at all. And the last card, of course, Leather Armor. We talked about this card as well. Leather Armor, just a really weak piece of armor, not really good in the slightest. Maybe good in the very early game, but it's going to quickly become a little bit obsolete. Just gives +1 to whoever wears it and ward 1. I mean, there may be chances where it does become slightly useful, but probably not to the point where you're going to ever want this in your deck. So it's going to be the very last pick of this pack. So what do you think? I'm pretty sure there are folks who are going to move things around. People might even think Priest of Ancient Lores should be the best card, which, you know, I can see that. People might say the Eye of Vachna should be first. People might say the Barrowit might be first. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your opinion on what cards should be picked in which order. I think of all the videos so far, this one might be the one that could change the most depending on what other people think. Because the top 2 are definitely cards that I think people wouldn't necessarily be that high on. So thanks for watching again. I love doing these. It's been a lot of fun just to go through cards. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.